After the announcement of a deadline for the vaccine, there's yet another piece of good news that our viewers need to know. And this is with regards to a new form of testing that will now be available in India, thanks to a team of doctors led by Dr. Maithi and Dr. Debojyoti Chakraborty, who is part of the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. They have developed what is called the Feluda strip test, and we'll talk all about it over the next 20 minutes or so to understand this test, which is supposed to be cheaper, faster, and a simpler alternative to the RT-PCR test, and more conclusive in nature, and also more accurate than the antigen test. Remember, the Delhi government has been facing a lot of flack over its dependence on antigen test and not using the RT-PCR enough, and therefore the margin of error is quite high with the antigen, not so for the Feluda test. Well, that's what we are told. In fact, it's our privilege that we are actually joined by Dr. Debojyoti Chakraborty, who is part of this team that has developed the Feluda test. Good afternoon, Dr. Chakraborty. Thanks so much for joining us here on Mirror Now this afternoon. And I'm really glad that you've given us your time. I'm sure you are going to be hounded with a lot of questions around Feluda. First of all, what an interesting name. What does it mean? Why is it called Feluda? How does it work? What is the science behind it, Dr. Chakraborty?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me. So the Feluda is an acronym. It is the full form is FN-Cas9 Editor Linked Uniform Detection Assay. The name is also, the acronym is actually sounds the same as a Bengali detective. Incidentally, Soumitra Chatterjee, who is a doyen of Bengali cinema and Indian cinema, passed away last week itself in Calcutta after battling with COVID, and he used to play the role of Feluda in Satyajit Ray movies. Both of us, Dr. Shobik and me, are Bengalis, and we were looking for an Indian detective's name to give name to the test, and that's why Feluda was an automatic choice. It basically uses a CRISPR-Cas9 technology, which incidentally won the Nobel Prize in 2020 chemistry to detect the SARS-CoV-2 infection on a paper strip.
Yes. Right. In fact, I must congratulate you for bringing this particular test to India, which we believe will definitely help in augmenting the testing. And that is one of the big challenges. The population is huge. The numbers that we are dealing with are huge. And therefore, we need simpler, more accessible, cheaper testing methods, and your contribution there is truly remarkable. I want to ask you that for the understanding of our viewers, since we already had two other forms of testing, the RT-PCR and the antigen,
Right. Okay. I think there is a problem there in the connection. Dr. Chakraborty, if you can hear me, I wanted to know from you precisely about how this test is different from the other tests that we have so far, the RT-PCR and the antigen test.
Right. So, the SARS-CoV-2 detection is generally happening in three different ways. One is where you are detecting the protein of the virus, which is called an antigen test. Antigen test, like you have said just a few minutes back, it is rapid, but it is also not very sensitive. So that's why it has a sensitivity issue. Then there is, of course, the antibody test, which is where the body's immune reaction to the virus exposure is measured. Of course, that is not a real-time infection status, which the test gives. So it is not useful for knowing whether a person has a COVID-19 infection. And the third one is the nucleic acid test, for which the quantitative real-time PCR is the gold standard, which actually accurately predicts whether the virus is present at that point of time in the sample or not. So the Feluda is actually a replacement for the quantitative real-time PCR test. As per the DCGI and ICMR guidelines, one who performs this test does not have to go and again do a quantitative real-time PCR test. So it gives a sensitivity and specificity at par with the QRT-PCR test, but without the use of a quantitative real-time PCR machine. Rather, the output is seen on a simple paper strip in the form of a visual readout.
All right. Those are important points that you're making here, I want to also understand, is there any margin of error? Because accuracy is one of the primary things that everyone will be looking at, for the success of any kind of testing method.
Right. So the margin of error is actually very, very low. When this was evaluated, so basically the Feluda was licensed to Tata MD Medical and Diagnostics, and they have launched now a kit which is called the Tata MD Check, which is powered by the Feluda technology. In third-party evaluation done by DCGI, it came up with a 96% sensitivity and 98% specificity at the same error margin that a normal quantitative real-time PCR test would also give. So therefore, it is highly accurate in that way, and is also very sensitive and can predict very few copies of the virus in the sample.
Right, Dr. Debojyoti Chakraborty, really appreciate your joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for giving us an understanding of this new form of test that you have developed for this country. Thanks for joining us.